One of the best antidotes to burnout is to focus on our values and living according to what our values would tell us is the the right way for us personally to live. And I certainly can't tell anybody else what their values should be or what's the best way for them to live. But we do know that based on lots of experience and lots of data that when we focus on fulfilling our values, living up to whatever true north we personally believe in, and we focus our attention mainly on that, on living within the guidelines that are true for us, that is one of the best ways to enjoy peace of mind and to, by extension, to avoid burnout. And so there's, as I say, there's lots of data. We've all of folks that we've worked with in our burnout program have proven that focusing on values versus focusing on disturbing thoughts or emotions is in fact the way to lead a fulfilling, joyful life, versus being bullied by our mind or emotions who tell us that all kinds of crazy things, mainly messages like there isn't enough, or that of anything, or that we aren't enough as people, no matter how hard we try, that we have to keep trying and trying and trying and trying. So because we preach so often that the solution is to follow our values and to live in harmony with our values versus trying to placate or soothe the disturbing thoughts and emotions in our head, I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference. And over the next, this Facebook Live and the next one, we'll be talking about the difference. So a lot of what most of us do, and certainly those of us who are in burnout do, is to try to placate or soothe our disturbing thoughts or emotions. So our thoughts and emotions will tell us we're not working hard enough, and so to soothe our emotions or our thoughts, we work harder and harder and harder, not realizing that our brain is intended to keep us safe, and which means basically for us to have enough to eat, to have a safe place to live, etc. And from our mind's perspective, there is no enough. Our mind will constantly be nagging at us to do more, to do more, to do more, to do more. Because for our mind to tell us you've got enough, stop working, is counterintuitive. It's not the way our mind is designed. Our mind is designed for us to be in perpetual pursuit of more food, more and better shelter and security and community. That's what our mind does. Our mind is never going to say, okay, you can stop looking for food now, because that would be death. We have to always be eating more, and we have to always be in a safe place, etc. So all our mind knows is to nag us, and there will never come a day where our mind goes, okay, you're good. That's just not the way our minds are designed. And so unfortunately, this is why our minds can be such a bully. And it's one thing to eat every day, but the way that our minds get, particularly in burnout, is in sort of a berserk rampage, where our minds are just constantly broadcasting, you're not working hard enough, you're not trying hard enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you don't know enough, you're not skilled enough, etc. And the more stressed out we get, the more stressed out our brain gets, and it can go on this kind of lunatic rampage of just constantly filling our minds or filling our whole bodies with the message that there's not enough, and we have to keep trying harder and harder and harder and harder and work more and more and more and more and more. And this isn't, this is the way our brains are designed. This is what our mind is meant to do, not to run this crazy rampage, but to keep us safe, to make sure that we keep putting one foot in front of the other, to make sure that we eat every day, to make sure that we're constantly on the lookout for shelter and community. This is what our mind does. And so while it can do some very sophisticated things, anything from changing a tire to splitting an atom, as I like to say, the brain can do some very fancy, spectacular things. But one thing it really cannot do is to soothe us, or it can't stop itself from giving us these constant warnings about how things might be dangerous, and we might run out of food, and we might run out of shelter, and we might run out of resources, because it wants us to keep going and going and going, and that's its adaptive function. And when we're in burnout, it's running amok for sure. So the thing that our brains want to do naturally is or the way we react to what our mind is saying is we want to do what our mind is telling us to do. Unfortunately, our mind is never going to tell us, okay, you're good now. You know enough now. You're pretty enough now. You're competent enough now. You have enough food. You have enough shelter. You can stop trying. You can stop worrying. Our brain is just not organized to do that. It's not designed to do that. And so what happens is in an attempt to soothe our brain, to make our brain calm down and to stop bothering us. And this is what we mean by allowing our minds to bully us with disturbing thoughts and emotions. There really isn't a way to make our brains calm down and stop bullying us. And when we attempt to do that, we run ourselves ragged and we get into burnout. And I've used the analogy of compulsive hand washing in the past, but this is a really good example of what the mind does. The mind says your hands are dirty, wash them. And so, but they're just going to get dirty again. There's never going to be a point in our lives where we don't have to wash our hands. And it's pretty easy for our minds to get into over revved mode and say, by washing our hands, what it really does is remind our brains that our hands are dirty or were dirty. And unfortunately, when it comes to compulsive hand washing, that's really what happens, is that the very action of washing our hands reinforces the thought, my hands are dirty, because that's the only reason you wash your hands. And this is when we try to soothe, if you have obsessive compulsive disorder, like washing your hands, the action of washing your hands actually reminds you of the fact that your hands are dirty. And the more you wash your hands, the more you need to wash your hands. And that's the origin of obsessive compulsive disorder, because the very thought of washing our hands has embedded in it the thought, my hands are dirty. So we keep tattooing our brains with this thought. And it's very similar to any time we try to soothe our brains or try to satisfy our brain. So if our brain says we're not pretty enough, we can go crazy and get plastic surgery and more clothes and et cetera, et cetera. But if our brain is in this not enough mode, we're never going to get handsome or pretty enough. And so the danger with trying to soothe our minds is that they can't be soothed. Again, our minds are great for changing a tire. Our minds are great for splitting an atom for some of us and for doing other practical things. But what our mind is not good at, in fact, can't do, is to make disturbing thoughts or emotions go away or get rid of them or forget them. Our brains aren't going to forget anything. Our brains are memory machines. They're designed to remember everything. And so when we tell our mind, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants, unfortunately, the very thought pink elephants is embedded in our intention to make the thought go away. So self-soothing of that type can only work briefly, and invariably it makes the thing that we're trying to get rid of come back even stronger, whether that thing is dirty hands or not pretty enough or not smart enough or not knowledgeable enough or not skilled enough or whatever. Any attempt that we make to make the thought goes away actually makes the thought come back stronger. And yet this is as far as most of us get, is this attempt to self-soothe. We want to placate our brains. Our brains are like a bully, and we think that if we give the bully our lunch money, he'll go away. Unfortunately, if we give this bully our lunch money, he'll come back tomorrow and want more money. This is what our brain, a burned out brain in particular, does. So that kind of begs the question, so what do we do? If we can't avoid thoughts and we can't make them go away because we remember everything, because our brains are designed to remember everything, then what do we do? And there is a middle ground that works very, very well. It's just a bit counterintuitive. And it has to do with accepting and embracing our brains as just being another organ. So our brains create thoughts. Our gallbladders produce bile, I think. Our pancreases produce insulin. And we don't fault our insulin or our gallbladders for producing what they produce. In fact, if anything, we should be grateful to them for doing what they do. And it's never, unless we're in disease, it's not a problem. In fact, we're not even aware of it. And this is the kind of relationship that we can gradually have with our minds, that our minds are producing useful things called thoughts. They're not always useful, and sometimes they can produce too many thoughts and a lot of negative thoughts. Um, but we can begin to have a relationship with our mind that is as impersonal as our relationship with our pancreas or our gallbladder. We don't have to take our brains quite so seriously. And that is the way out of burnout, amongst many other things. So we're going to talk about the danger of self-soothing um, with a bully that just cannot be satisfied, no matter how much lunch money we give the bully, and no matter how hard we try to be prettier or smarter to our brains, it's only going to make the bully meaner and tougher. So if you'd like to know more about this and about how to break through burnout, check out burnoutbreakthrough.com. And if you'd like to schedule a call with me, and I'd love to talk to you about it. Thanks a lot.